Hey, good evening, everybody. We are back for another amazing episode of D Live, the Convo series. I've got Chris Wagner joining me here in a moment. We'll touch base with Chris, learn more about his background and the position he's running for, Hamilton County Judge in the Court of Common Pleas. And we'll give folks just a moment to come online here as folks join us live. It usually takes 30 seconds to a minute, and we get some folks joining us. So welcome. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of issues, obviously, that are very current and up to date with our criminal justice system happening across the country, really, in the latest craziness up in Minneapolis. And I think we're going to touch a little bit on that to the extent that Chris can as a judicial candidate. You know, like we like to do here on the show, is to get a little more information about the background, learn more about the individual, more than just the kind of the public persona and the face that you see in the campaign, and kind of the unique role that our judges play and that they also face from a campaign perspective and what that looks like. So with that being said, we've got a couple of folks joining us here. So Chris, thank you for joining me this evening, and welcome to the big show.
Derek, thank you so much. It's a great opportunity, especially at the state of campaigning. It's vehicles like this that all candidates could really appreciate.
Right, and that's one of the things they talk about is reaching the voters where they are, right? And I think these days we're spending more and more time online as we kind of shelter in place, still to a degree, although we're starting to open up. So first of all, I was, kind of in preparation, believe it or not, folks, I do a little bit of research and a little bit of background before we come on here. And I was going over Chris's, and I put the website up in the comments, by the way. And if anybody has any questions as we go along, please drop those in the comments. And as always, I'll keep an eye on them. I was going over your resume here, and you are one of probably the most, and we have many, qualified candidates with our Democratic judicial slate, extremely qualified candidates. But your resume here, including time as a special assistant U.S. attorney, working in the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's office, working now in the Hamilton County Clerk of Court's office as chief of compliance and chief of the Bailiff division. It's an amazing resume. And I want to touch on some of your experiences in those roles and how that's going to prepare you for your time on the bench. But also just want to learn a little bit more about you, how you got to be passionate about these things, passionate about the law, and kind of your backstory. So with that, if you could just let us get to know you a little bit better.
Great. Well, again, thanks so much for the opportunity. So I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. My family's not originally from Cincinnati. We actually are from a small town east of here, Portsmouth, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And we moved here when I was 7. And I grew up in White Oak. Went to St. James Elementary School there with my 2 siblings. And went to high school at St. Xavier High School. And hometown guy, I went to Xavier University, graduated in 95 with a degree in international relations. Through high school and growing up, I've always had a fascination with the law. My great-grandfather was a lawyer. My uncle's a lawyer. Both of them went to University of Cincinnati Law School. Definitely had an attraction to that early on. It could be genetics, I don't know, but I definitely had it. And I think I even took one of those aptitude tests in high school, and it said law. I mean, it wasn't even close to everything else. And so I guess I always kind of knew I wanted to do that. But right out of college, I took a job at Fidelity Investments and was doing brokerage work in the investment industry, which was a great company to work for. I learned a lot, but it was always with the eye that I was going to go to law school. And so about 2 years later, I went to University of Cincinnati and started, which was perfect because I met my wife the first semester. And so, I'm glad I chose the path that I did. We're married, have three kids of our own, live out in Anderson. It was in law school that I had more of a fascination for constitutional law, civil law. I didn't really want to go into to criminal. But I got a job right out of law school as a clerk for Judge Anne Marie Tracy in the Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. And it was there that I completely had a change. So you learn by actually being in the courthouse, any courthouse, and I don't care what it, that it's not like the movies, it's not like the television shows. It's much different. It's at the same time more exciting, yet more boring than you could possibly imagine. But it's where the real skill of the practice of law mixes with the art of the practice of law, and you see it. It's the not to dismiss other people's law practices, but the courtroom to me was just I couldn't find anything more exciting, more fulfilling to do. And when you want to be a trial litigator, criminal is the realm to go. Either as a prosecutor or a public defender, you will get trial experience. You will pick juries, and as a vehicle like nothing else. And so I wanted to become a prosecutor from seeing actually the room prosecutor who inspired me was none other than Greg Hartman, our former clerk of courts, who had a very a good manner about him, the way at least I thought about how he approached his cases, just as a professional. And I said, I could do that. I want to do that. I married, I kind of make this a stump speech joke, but I married the Democratic chairman's daughter, and I got nowhere in the Hamilton County prosecutor's office. I didn't even get an interview, but I interviewed, sent resumes all across Ohio, all the big counties, and got a job offer in Cuyahoga County. So where Cleveland is, and Cuyahoga County is the busiest courthouse, 34 judges, so twice the numbers here, twice the dockets, chaotic and busy. It was a phenomenal place to kind of cut your teeth as a young lawyer and as a litigator. I greatly enjoyed my time there. It was about over almost 7 years, like 6.5 years or whatever. And I worked my way up as just a juvenile prosecutor in juvenile court up there, all the way up to as a major trial prosecutor. So I was lead chair in murder, rape cases. Also, I was doing gang investigations with federal and local law enforcement, forming different task force to tackle drug trafficking and other related crimes to gang activity up there. And was cross-designated as a special assistant U.S. attorney up there. And just to kind of complete the arc, with that experience, I got a job offer to be the managing attorney of the Cincinnati office of the Ohio Attorney General, and moved my family before my kids got too old to start school. It was, the oldest was turning 5, so it was then or never. And so my wife and I moved back to sunnier Southern Ohio and away from the Cleveland winters. As lovely as the people are, their winters are brutal.
Well, I know that quite well, being originally from the Cleveland area. Believe it or not, the weather is significantly better. And so we think the weather's terrible here, but it's significantly better. And so on that note, and I want to kind of continue that and bring it up to the present day. But as we do that, one of the things I want to kind of touch on and help folks to understand is that, and you mentioned, working in the prosecutor's office, where it's an elected position. We have had this scenario in Hamilton County where really the courthouse in general, including the prosecutors, until recently, we've started to make inroads, and I think we're going to continue to do that across our kind of the spectrum of the criminal justice system in Hamilton County as far as the Democrats go. But it's this unique situation that we have where, justice is supposed to be blind. You have judges that apply the law, but yet it's still a political race. When you see your ballot, there's not a D or R there for the judges. But yet I think there's some differences in terms of how we approach things, and we talk about criminal justice reform and some of those things, which necessarily isn't a judicial necessarily, but that's what I think some folks have a little struggle of understanding how that works. So as you kind of move forward and bring us up to date on your resume, if we could just kind of touch on that and maybe add some clarity to that to help folks understand how that works.
Well, So yeah, I mean, I cut my teeth up in Cuyahoga County, and that was a democratically run office. Cuyahoga County is a Democratic stronghold, and I got to learn a lot of the big party politics that a big metro county is gonna have, and it's a similar model, just difference on size, whether you're in Chicago or down in Cincinnati, which is smaller, and how the party's endorsements, union endorsements, different groups endorsements can make or break a local election. It's hard to break through the noise, especially if you're in a cycle with a presidential or a heated congressional, even a gubernatorial, for that matter. So it is hard. So a strong party with a strong network that they can get down ballot names out is an advantage. Here in Hamilton County, the Democratic Party didn't have that sort of strength outside of certain areas of the county. Now that's kind of changing, but you still see that there is a more pronounced drop off on Democratic voters versus Republican voters.
When you say that, just to clarify, you mean when going down the ballot, there's a drop off. And I think that's one of the things that, and I was pretty active in supporting the judicial slate in 2018 when we saw some fantastic wins for Democrats and really starting to kind of break through that stranglehold that the Republicans have had on the Hamilton County Courthouse since the beginning of time. And we've seen now where people are starting to understand the power and the strength of that slate and the Democratic slate in Hamilton County. But the one thing that we try to remind folks, and is going to be even more important going forward, is to remember when you get down on your ballot, the judges don't have a D or R by the name. So that's why that slate and the slate card, and to the degree as Democrats that we get that out in people's hands and they understand that and they literally have that with them when they vote, it's so important. I think that's the kind of the point that you're getting at, and that we need to be even better at doing that.
But to get to the other part of your question, though, so I mean, you're going to need party help to win in Ohio for judicial races, because we elect our state judges. Other jurisdictions, other states don't do it this way, and there's always been a sort of a disagreement or arguments about what's the best way to place judges. Are they appointed? Are they appointed but then have to go and get basically their own referendum to be reaffirmed by the voters? And I've always been partial to electing. None of the systems I just outlined are perfect. They all have their inherent flaws in it. And I can tell you right now that what's best about the election is it is humbling. It keeps the judiciary closer to the people. Mm-hmm. But you need contested races, and so how the contested races goes back to one party control in a courthouse for a long time. They may not have serious challengers or good qualified candidates challenging them for the position, because it's very important, the quality of the candidate, quality of the judge, for the judicial community, the law enforcement community, and then just the public at large. They want to know that. They want to have confidence in the people they're putting at the bench. Yeah. Because the last point you're bringing up is about the independence, because you still want to have someone who can go against public opinion alone, and it can get pretty lonely as a judge if you're the one making these calls. But since the founding of our republic, we put people in these positions where the powers of a judge, if your case is before the judge, are immense. The governor can't touch it, the president can't touch it. I mean, they can control so much of the aspects of these powers, these historic powers. And so you need to have faith that they'll do it right, they'll do it fairly, and they'll do it independently. So in Ohio, the judges, Republican and Democratic alike, have a strong history of asserting the independence of the third branch of government in our state. I have, working in Clerk's office, working with AFTAB, we're in charge of a lot about the inner workings of the court. Basically how a lawsuit starts to its finished, the clerk and the staff are touching it all in the process. And one of the things that we do is we actually take the court costs. Now, no one really likes to thought of about fees or costs being paid to a lawsuit in any manner, but it serves an important function. It's the court's charges to make sure that it brings in sufficient revenue to cover its operational needs, because it can't tax. It can't collect the money. It can't raise taxes. It can't issue bonds. All that belongs to the other branches of the government. And if the other branches of the government said, we don't care about the courts, your courts would wither. And so, like, when I talk about the independence, just one alone, is the judges need to know that they bring in the funds to fund their operations, and they need to be fiscally responsible with their funds, and they need to be efficient. The faster cases are disposed of, then you have court costs collected and moved to the general revenue fund of Hamilton County, which could go back into pretrial services. It can go into your probation department. You could partner up with social service agencies to provide other sorts of specialized treatments for all types of defendants, civil cases mediation. All these type of programs cost money, and please. I'm not trying to bash other branches of government, but the reason why we do this is so that to make sure that the court can survive, that the court can maintain its independence. But no matter what, the judge, our judiciary, needs to have the faith of the legal community. It needs to have the faith of the voters. That's why I think directly electing and making people campaign, which is, as you know, Derek, is grueling and hard.
There's no doubt about that. And it's even more challenging, right now. And as a matter of fact, our mutual friend Carrie Bloom, we've had on the show, and is running for juvenile court judge in Hamilton County as well. We were discussing this very topic, how it's just a challenge right now. There's no events to go to. Fundraising is a challenge, and it's more of a challenge for the judges, because there's these kind of arcane laws about, you need money for the campaign. Those yard signs, all that stuff isn't free. But yet, when you're talking to somebody and you can't actually ask for money. So there has to be some other party actually asking. So on your behalf, I will say, everybody, I already put Chris Wagner judge.com in the comments. Go on there and drop a donation, even if it's $5 or whatever you can do today, because Chris isn't allowed to ask. So we'll get him off the hook for that. I'm going to ask for him. But there are just these weird, we're kind of touching on that from multiple different angles, how it's political, but yet we do certain things with the law to, have you remain independent, nevertheless. But this is kind of an interesting topic, one that hasn't really come up too much in the past in these, in the discussions that I've had, is this discussion about, the actual operation or the functioning of the courthouse. And so you've seen that from a prosecutor's perspective. I've certainly seen it in my law enforcement career. We all know, or everybody knew who the judges were, that you could plan to be there all day. If you were going to be there at 9 a.m., you're going to be there all day. But with some other judge, it's, things run like clockwork, and it's not strung out like that. So are you, what do you see in terms of maybe efficiencies or those types of things that have gone on that we can improve upon in the Hamilton County Courthouse when we do have folks such as yourself that are more interested in seeing some of these efficiencies take place? Are there improvements that can be made?
There's improvements that can be done in any courthouse in our state, and it needs to be reevaluated periodically to see what other continual improvements. Life changes, things change. In a moment, I guess I want to talk about current developments, because current developments going on right now.
Sure.
No one really could have anticipated, which is, that could be a whole hour show alone on that. But I love the way that a courthouse ticks, the way it operates, and no, it's not a model of efficiency, but it never has been. But it does, things get done. And if you understand how it works, you can advise your client, know what to expect, and you can see that's the skill and an art or the practice of law. And I just, I love it. certain, pre-pandemic things that I wanted to focus on, was a few different things. One, I wanted to expand mental health and drug treatment to more defendants than those that are currently given to. Now, from your background, I mean, I read pre-sentence investigation reports for the people I prosecute in their sentencing, and too often, far too often, three things would pop up. We'd have someone with an undiagnosed, untreated mental health condition, a substance abuse condition, probably come from self-medicating, but who knows where it originated from. And oftentimes the person was a veteran. And it would just seem sad that you keep seeing the things over and over again, and the history, the repeat offenses, some minor, some not. And when you're dealing with a victim who has to deal with the courthouse, right, they can't appreciate the idiosyncrasies of a courthouse like a lawyer or a police officer or everybody else who knows it just can accept it. And it's frustrating. And if there's a way to avoid having victims in the future to make their time a little bit more bearable, that is a priority. So that's on the criminal front. I would say that on the civil front, I've done civil practice before, and there's constitutional and statutory necessity, the requirements that the court must focus on its criminal docket before it's civil, but you don't ignore the civil. And you got to make sure that you're giving the civil attorneys who have their cases to know that their motions are getting ruled expeditiously, that they understand what the rules of evidence. Now, I mean, it's the same thing. You couldn't have a criminal matter where you got the jury filing in and you still got that motion to suppress the evidence pending. And it's like, wait, well, no. That needs to be resolved. What's the evidence that this jury's going to hear? These are the type of things that really, in a nutshell, that you can serve the civil docket best by getting that done in advance. That may precipitate settlement negotiations, resolve unnecessary or weaker, tort claims or civil claims. Focus on what's important. If it has to be tried, we try it. I love trials. I love to get a jury involved. I think it's just, the best part about our legal system, but I want to make sure that the people coming in feel comfortable, that they know that they're going to get their day in court and they're going to get heard, and their time's not going to be wasted.
So bring up a good point. Let me interrupt you just for a moment right there. Maybe a lot of people don't realize that we think about, when we think about the Court of Common Pleas, which are felony cases from a criminal perspective, but Common Pleas Court also hears civil cases. Can you just briefly tell us what are the parameters for that? What type of, it's not small claims, right? What type of cases would the County Common Pleas Court hear from us on a civil side?
Well, it would be higher dollar amount cases. It's usually based upon a statutorily determined damage amount. But so the realm would be contract disputes, civil torts of X dollar amount and damage. A foreclosure, I mean, the prices of most houses or the foreclosure action goes to Common Pleas. But that's the traditional civil realm. But the court has its inherent common power, equity powers, which comes to Common Pleas, not municipal. And the equity powers of the judge, when I said judges are powerful, the judges are powerful. And the issuance of a writ or a command to either another branch of government to either do something or to cease doing something is immense. Those type of claims. So you could talk, it could border on a constitutional violation allegation. It could be civil rights, but or somebody's being continually damaged. Money doesn't solve all problems. The ceasing of a harm solves problems. So it can be. So these powers that we're talking about go to Common Pleas, and sometimes they're an emergency where people can immediately get in front of a judge and get their day in court heard on that. So those are the type of things that are typically covered. It's twice the number of criminal cases. They take a little bit longer to go through because the discovery vehicles are different. There could be some complicated issues, dispute between corporations can involve multiple witnesses and multiple documents that makes a criminal case pale in comparison. So it takes a little bit longer, but just like all civil and trial litigators need to know, well, what do I need to prove? You know, what are we fighting about today? What's the key issue? Let's get the other stuff removed and focus on what's important, and let the jury decide. Now, you talked about the waiting around. Civil folk will wait around for settlement conferences. Police officers will wait around. It seems like incredibly inefficient, just in case this is the case that goes to trial that day. There's always good reasons for a continuance, but we can't have going forward until there's a vaccine to COVID-19, a bunch of people milling around the courthouse waiting. It needs to be prioritized that I have business in the courthouse for a hearing. I need to file something. I need to get historic documents from the clerk's office. I need to get in and I need to get out. You just can't have people milling around like we used to have. It's not. So even the way that courts would, put 3 or 4 cases set for trial on the same day, and you see what shakes out, and we'll see which one goes. No, it's going to be different.
Well, and so I appreciate that, and we're getting a little bit in the weeds here, but I think this is pretty important. It's something that's not really ever talked about, but I experienced it for 26 years. And it really impacts not just the courthouse, but especially today when we look at, for example, the city of Cincinnati facing roughly now they've got the number whittled down to a $40 to $60 million budget deficit. We know that public safety, from a municipal budget standpoint, is the largest line item in any budget. And so you'll have this scenario at various courthouses, really across the country. But I experienced it time and time again, where you will have cops sitting around on overtime, spending a whole day there, and we don't even think about this. But next thing you know, you've got 8 or 10 hours of overtime, and it was just time that was wasted. You're literally sitting there doing nothing, and you wonder, what's going on. And it's the cops and the prosecutors. You have a little leeway to be back in chambers or whatever, but you're not going back there and telling the judge to hurry up.
Right.
And so you're just stuck, and you sit there. And I've actually been in scenarios where we had a municipal court judge up in Mason who was ultimately removed from the bench. But one of the things that he liked to do was, if I have a room full of 20 cops out there, then I'm kind of, lording over things. But meanwhile, it's running up a massive tab, for the taxpayers in doing this. And that particular individual, like I said, ended up being removed, which almost never happens. But the Supreme Court removed him from the bench as a municipal court judge. But that was one of the things that was going on. And I saw my paycheck was going, but I didn't want to be there all day. It's like I work.
Sure.
Now I'm in court all day. It's not even safe. It's dangerous. Nobody ever talks about those things. So I appreciate that you're bringing this up and even making it a topic of something that's never really talked about. But that was just kind of my little rant on that. So I appreciate you.
Well, I mean, I would just to say that, like, you just can't have people milling around anymore. Like, especially a lot of jurors, and this is going to be a difficult question going forward. Now, I got, in addition to what we talked about, my resume is this beginning of May, I was sworn in as the current 129th president of the Cincinnati Bar Association.
Well, I gotta check that one off on the resume. You guys, this is one of the qualified guys I've ever met here for this. It's on us, folks, if we don't put Chris Wagner on the bench, because this has got to be one of the best resumes I've ever seen. But president of the Cincinnati Bar Association, as well,
which is it's a great honor to be recognized by your peers, just to run our association. And as president of the Bar Association, I got on a task force that was put together very quickly to get a report to the Chief Justice of the state of Ohio on how to resume jury trials. And we had 10 days, and we not only got civil and criminal attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys, we got bailiffs, sheriffs, court reporters, and to all pitch in, give a recommendation. And there's a lot of different ideas, a lot of concurrent ideas, but having working in a courthouse for as many years as I have, the things that can be easily understood that if you're trying to keep social distancing, this whole notion that the court waits for no one, everyone waits on the court, is an unsustainable model. The trials are going to be a little bit longer, right? We're going to schedule some witnesses. They're going to come in on the day they're scheduled, and then we're going to quit for the day, and then we're going to bring it. It's not like, you just keep rolling until it's over. We're going to have to schedule. So, if you got to sit, we'll work it through. But also with the jurors, right? A lot of people and it's going to be understandable. They're going to be scared to call out. The courthouse has a perception. It might not be viewed as the cleanest, safest building in the world for as far as a pandemic goes. But, it's important. People will come. People do come. We sent out jury summonses not too long ago for grand jury, and we got people to come in and do their civic duty, which was great. But we got to be cognizant. We cannot waste those people's time. We can't have, the big county model, because it's the Cuyahoga County, Franklin County, every the big counties in Ohio, where you got a big pool of jurors, and you go, you grab them, and you start your trial. It's going to go back to because I prosecuted cases in large counties and small counties. Small counties do it much different. If you're set for a trial on Monday, they send out the jury summons at the end of the week prior. And then those people are the ones that come in. They came in specifically for your case. I was actually surprised. I actually was trying a case in Clark County, and there was a sheriff's deputy in the back of the courtroom, and one of the jurors didn't show up, and the judge just sort of kind of motioned his head to the deputy. Deputy gets up and leaves. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm just trying to pick my jury and ask questions that are pertinent. And at lunch break, that deputy turns out to be the sheriff, comes in with the guy who didn't show up, right? And just tells the judges, yeah, I took him off his tractor right in his field. That's where I found him, Judge. He wasn't coming in. And I'm like, well, I take jury service really seriously. I was like, I really appreciate that.
He is right? Now.
Send a personal lesson. Of course, the judge was like, I started asking him questions about being on your panel. And I'm like, oh, I don't want this guy. I was like, you just hauled him in the back of a cruiser, with lights and sirens going through your county. Like, he might not straight the state of Ohio real well right now. So I don't have many questions, But I mean, I'm not proposing that part, but, that's how it is. It's like right. you need, 12 jurors. You might send out 20 summonses, and that's your panel. And that's what you got to work with the other day. It's still, the judges in our courthouse are working through it. It may seem slow to people. It's going to be hard. It's got to be, we got to start really ramping up operations close to what it was before. I agree but there are going to be some major changes in how we do things, and it will never go back the way it was before.
Well,
I don't see that happening.
And I think we'll be better off for it to the degree that we can, really kind of bring these efficiencies that you're talking about. And I love that you're talking about this stuff, because it's just something that generally isn't, and in my experience, we can use quite a bit more of. So with all that being said, let's kind of bring it up to the present day and touch on some of the current events that are going on. One of the things that you mentioned, which I also appreciate, was a focus on, some of these underlying causes. It's really easy to say, lock them up and throw away the key, that kind of old school type of thing. I had Charmaine McGuffey on the show, and we were talking about, from our careers from the law enforcement side of the criminal justice system, just having more of this focus on these underlying issues. As you mentioned, typically there's substance abuse, mental health issues, all of these things. And if we're not addressing all of that in kind of a holistic way, it's really just a haphazard, it's a Band-Aid approach, and it's not fair to people like on a human level. And then with all that being said, we also know the challenges that we have in the criminal justice system today, especially if you are a black man, to be quite honest. And unfortunately, and we're seeing the terrible outcomes of that it seems like Groundhog Day. It just keeps happening and happening. I know you're a little bit limited from an ethics perspective of what you can comment on in terms of active cases going on across the country today, but What can you share with us about just your thoughts and kind of the role of our criminal justice system and the judiciary with what's happening, and so that folks know that when they show up in front of you at your bench, that they're going to be treated fairly, and that all of these other things aren't going to play a role in that. They're treated just the same as and with the dignity that anybody else would have.
Well, we talked briefly before the show. So there's been some pretty high profile concerning cases. As a judicial candidate, I can't comment on a case or prejudge a case, and that's where the importance. Even if it doesn't have to be in this jurisdiction, it can be anywhere in the country. That is a restriction on the speech of a judge, and I think it's very merited. It's important. You can't comment because you can't tell people what you would do in a certain circumstance because you're prejudging it, and that means the person would walk in knowing I'm going to lose. People don't really like it, and they at times, and you see this when judges are being interviewed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're trying to tease out an answer. Well, that's not what it's supposed to be. I mean, that's what the legislature comes out and the candidate says, this is where I'm going to go. This is the laws I'm going to write. This is how I'm going to vote. The judge needs to have the faith in the people and committed to maintaining the faith of the people by saying, I will follow the law. And the Constitution is supreme above the law. And if a determination needs to be made that the law violates the Constitution wins. Okay? You need to have that faith. But what people are looking for, it took me many years to kind of understand like the nuances about how trials work, how the system works on both the civil and criminal matter before you sort of get the appreciation. People come in and they've been harmed. A defendant's charged, the defendant's family and defendant are harmed. No one's happy. No one wants to be here. So, my first observation is to make sure jurors understand that they have to give this the highest regard because those people are counting, both sides, civil, criminal, doesn't matter. And oftentimes people talk about that, it's that justice is punishment. And when you try cases and you deal with victims and witnesses, very few victims have ever told me what they wanted as a punishment. I've actually had a rape victim tell a judge that the defendant was expelled from college, a college that she loved. That was punishment enough. And she was a rape victim. But she wanted to be believed. When I first got promoted to as a major trial prosecutor, a good friend of mine had just had a very difficult case. It was mother's boyfriend had sexually molested her daughter, and it wasn't disclosed right away. That happens. By the time it was disclosed, any sort of forensic DNA evidence that all of our entertainment and shows will just say is the most crucial, important thing in the world was gone. It just could not be there. It was a late disclosure. This happens. What the state of Ohio had was the testimony of a brave little girl to stand in a room of adults and say what happened to her and say it under oath. Now, that's the way the law for centuries has said is sufficient evidence if the jury believes. So he put all his art and his skill in the case, but he couldn't get a unanimous verdict of guilt. And he had to call the family, and he told the mom. And, he was heartbroken by having to tell her what happened. And the little girl's voice broke over the phone. And she said, Mama, does that mean they didn't believe me? She just wanted to be believed. And that's what all people want. And so when you have these kind of cases, they want their day in court to be believed. To hear about what's going on in Minnesota and Georgia, those family members want to have what happened be believed. They want the closure. It's not about a punishment. It's not about a check. It's not about money damage. It's about the closure so people can move forward. And that's the importance of what a judiciary's got to deliver.
Right, right. No, that's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff, Chris. And for those of us that have been on the inside of the system and heard some of these stories from victims, suspects alike, a lot of times we don't necessarily, we want justice, but at the same token, when you start and you mentioned, pre-sentence investigations and those types of things, and you get into mitigation and factors, involved, and you realize, some of the heartbreaking things in terms of, especially with children and families and how they've been raised. There's just, when we talk about the criminal justice system, there are just so many variables that have to, that come into play there. And so much of it is just heart-wrenching and tragic that a lot of us, have good family structures and all of these types of things, we can't always wrap our heads around. But I think that's one of the things why it is so important for us to have good people in these roles and people with a broad base of experience and understanding to be able to weigh all of those things. And I think certainly, as we've learned in the last, I can't believe it's been 41 minutes already of our discussion. I think that's certainly the case for you. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate, obviously, a judicious person who is able to fend off my tough question and handle that appropriately, because there's only so much that you can talk about. So I appreciate that. I want to remind everyone, thank you all. We've had a great crew that's joined us throughout this conversation. Some comments. You might know this gal who stopped by, Meg, stopped by. Hello. And so thanks, Meg, for stopping by. Meg Wagner is your sister, correct? And
Campaign manager.
Sister / campaign manager, which maybe I'm not sure which one is the most important role, but doing a great job, and so we appreciate that. Just kind of in closing, any comments, any kind of closing thoughts that we can leave with, and then I'll do your pitch again at the end since you're not allowed to do it.
Well, yeah, again, is every opportunity to reach voters, to touch voters, and I want to tell them how important this is. Every race is important, and you need to have good quality people. And and being a judge is a tough spot. I've actually been in front of many great quality judges, and it is a tough job. But it rests with the faith of the people. Okay, a judge is, the old saying that the judge has the power of the pen versus the sword. And if the people believe in the power of the judge and the correctness, of the stance of the court's integrity is protected. And that's the most important thing. So that's why, the political strains, just the asking for money is just one element, but the things about what could be said, what you can say about your opponent is that you can't tear down the judiciary to win a campaign to put you on the judiciary, right? That's not going to be happening. But I guess the last thought, though, I think that's important for people to know is in a county like Hamilton County, so we have multiple judgeships. Okay, they're not, and the countywide offices on the even number of years like this year, the Common Pleas judges, they're individual seats. They come up on and cycles of different terms. And we have multiple judges because we're a big county. 800,000 people live in Hamilton County. But those judges run their branch of government, and they run it like a board, like a board of directors or board of trustees, and they got to get together. So big substantive changes occur when you actually have a majority opinion of the judiciary say, this is how we want to go ahead and write the rules that govern how the law is practiced, how people come into our courthouse. We write the rules. And so it's not just faith that, a person's a good trial attorney, can run a good courtroom. I want to run a great courthouse. I've been to great courthouses. I've been in front of judges. I think Hamilton County can be better. I think we can be a model for the state. I've worked for the state government before. I would love to best Franklin County as a personal goal. What always drives me is to be better than Franklin County. It'll keep me up at night to make sure that our courthouse is better than Franklin County. So,
I love that.
a little rivalry.
That is a rallying cry. That you've laid down the gauntlet for us. The challenge is there. Look, folks, we're going to continue to have great guests like Chris on talking about our wonderful slate of candidates, especially our judicial candidates. We made great strides and inroads in 2018. I think we're going to continue to do that in 2020. And just a reminder, first of all, go on chriswagnerforjudge.com in the comments there. Learn more about Chris and his background and platform. Drop a donation on him if you'd be so inclined. We'd certainly appreciate that. But remember, going forward in November, we have from the top on down. Obviously, we need to get 45 out of there and right down the list. But don't forget about our judges. These roles are so very important. You don't see the D or R, so make sure when the time comes, you've got that slate card. And we know who all the folks are that we need to get in there. So, with all of that being said, Chris, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
As always, I will go ahead and load this up to YouTube as well, so you can check it out on my YouTube page, Derek Bauman, and give us a subscribe on there. Would be fantastic. And we're going to have some more great guests next week. We're looking at Tuesdays and Thursdays right now. I want to continue to be consistent with the 7 o'clock hour. And we're going to have some more great Cincinnatians on and learn their stories. So with that all being said, Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure, and I love to hear what you're talking about. This is some good stuff.
All right. Thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Peace and love, Cincinnati. As always, be safe. Give all your loved ones an extra hug tonight. It's a good time for it. Take care. Have a great night, everybody.